The bold and the beautiful spoilers hint that Grace Buckingham may be arrested after Liam Spencer's tumor fakeout gets exposed. Will prison await the money grabber in the end? Based on all the evidence that B&B's offering at this point, it seems like Liam was treated for a tumor that never truly existed. Liam indeed landed in the hospital with a brain bleed after his collapse at Bill Spencer's place, but the rest appears to have been an elaborate scheme. It wouldn't have been that hard to swap in other scans for Liam's and make it look like he had an inoperable brain mass. As for the decline in Liam's condition, we'd say the drugs Grace gave him are to blame for that. Grace has seemingly been putting the pieces in place for this scam all along, and once Bill was there to foot the bill for Liam's medical miracle, she moved to the final phase. In other words, Grace apparently invented Liam's tumor so that she could convince Bill to pay for an unexpected cure. The surgery that Liam just went through probably didn't involve more than a cut on the back of his head to sell this. Of course, Grace is probably scrambling to pay off old debt connected to her ex-husband Reese Buckingham. It's easy to see that Grace feels guilty about what she's doing, but she may be protecting Zoe Buckingham and Paris Buckingham if they've been threatened over owed money. Regardless of what Grace is up against, it's cruel to manipulate Liam and Bill like this. Hope Logan and Steffi Forrester are manipulation victims too, since they've been dreading Liam's eventual demise. There was no need for any of that if Liam's tumor was a scam from the start. You can bet that Bill will want Grace to pay when the truth inevitably comes out. Grace may ultimately be placed under arrest for faking Liam's grim condition and convincing Bill to pay big bucks for an experimental treatment that wasn't even real. It'll be satisfying if Grace gets dragged away in handcuffs and thrown behind bars. The show may try to give Grace a sob story with all the debt drama, but she deserves to be locked up for her crimes. The bold and the beautiful spoilers say Grace won't get away with this indefinitely, so stay tuned for updates on the infuriating news ahead and Bill's fierce reaction. The bold and the beautiful spoilers for Friday, July 18th, reveal that Bill Spencer will get Liam Spencer's MRI results while Grace Buckingham's plan starts to crumble. Now that Liam has supposedly had his latest MRI and headed home to recover at his dad's place, Bill is holding out hope for confirmation that he's cured. Since Grace has gotten Bill excited about a miraculous outcome, that's what he's counting on. Liam's new nurse promised to reveal the MRI results as soon as they were sent over. So will they confirm that Liam's tumor is completely gone? There's a good chance they indeed will, since those results will presumably be part of Grace's apparent scam. It's doubtful that Liam truly had the MRI or even a real brain surgery other than Grace's incision on his head. Liam's tumor was probably bogus from the get-go, and a way to convince Bill to send that $1 million that he wired. Although Grace has the money she needs to pay off the person who's been making demands over the phone, her scheme is on the verge of falling apart. Bill was on speakerphone when he spilled about Grace's experimental surgery with a colleague, so now Steffi Forrester, Hope Logan, John Finnegan and Bridget Forrester all have plenty of questions. Hope and Steffi may continue to focus on the fact that Liam may survive after all. Bill's updates filled them with hope, but Bridget and Finn will obviously think the latest news sounds sketchy. Grace's behavior isn't adding up at all, so Finn and Bridget may launch a confrontation with her soon enough. Next on Friday's B&B episode, Rich Forrester, Brooke Logan and Taylor Hayes will share a surprising moment of peace, and Liam will be the reason why. The bold and the beautiful spoilers say Taylor, Brooke and Ridge will all agree that Liam deserves to live, so they'll find common ground. Bill Spencer stood just outside the hospital room, a man known for his bravado now immobilized by uncertainty. The envelope in his hand bore Liam's name, and inside it, the answers he had been waiting for, or dreading. It had been days since the accident, and despite Liam's efforts to downplay his symptoms, Bill had seen too many signs to ignore. Forgetfulness, dizziness, moments of disconnection. It all pointed to something deeper. Now the MRI results rested in Bill's palm like a loaded weapon. He remembered the crash vividly. Liam had been behind the wheel, claiming he was fine, insistent on taking Steffi's kids to the beach. But the sudden loss of focus, the swerve off the road, it had shaken everyone. The kids were unharmed, thank God, but Liam had suffered a blow to the head. He'd brushed it off, but Bill wasn't buying the act. Fathers could see what sons tried to hide. Inside the room, Liam was awake, scrolling through his phone with a fake nonchalance. His expression sharpened when Bill entered. "Well?" Liam asked, eyes flicking to the envelope. Bill's fingers tightened around it. We need to talk. Liam's jaw clenched. That bad? I don't know yet, Bill admitted. I haven't opened it. Figured we'd do it together. For a moment the air grew thick between them. Then Liam nodded. Bill tore the envelope open slowly, pulling out the pages. He scanned the first lines and his heart sank. There was a lesion. Small but concerning. A follow-up was recommended. The radiologist flagged something near the frontal lobe. Nothing definitive yet, but enough to explain the lapses in memory and focus. Bill didn't sugarcoat it when he read it aloud. Liam listened quietly, trying to stay stoic, but the color drained from his face. So what does this mean? Liam asked almost in a whisper. It means, Bill said carefully, that you're not imagining things. And that we're not taking any more chances. Liam let out a shaky breath and looked away. I thought it was just stress. Or maybe hitting my head harder than I thought. But I was trying to keep it together. For the kids. For Hope. You don't have to keep it together alone, Bill said, sitting beside him. We're going to get more tests. Specialists. Whatever it takes. Liam nodded slowly, but the fear was still etched into his face. He wasn't afraid of pain. He was afraid of what this meant for the people he loved, Hope, his kids, even his father. If something happened to him, the fallout would reach far beyond just one man. Meanwhile, Grace Buckingham had her own problems brewing. Her carefully laid plans, to manipulate, to steer, to control the situation around her daughter Paris, were beginning to unravel. Paris had always been headstrong, but Grace underestimated just how far her daughter was willing to go to protect her independence. Grace's plan had begun innocently enough. She had reservations about Paris's relationship with Zend, then Carter, then Thomas. There was always someone, always a man Grace deemed unsuitable. Her strategy had always been to subtly nudge Paris in the right direction, toward stability, respectability, and someone Grace could live with as a son-in-law. But Paris had grown tired of being steered. Now Grace was scrambling. The more she tried to tighten her grip, the more Paris slipped through her fingers. When Paris found out about Grace's latest stunt, feeding false stories to Zend to make him question Paris's loyalty, it backfired. Zend had confronted Paris in private, hurt and confused. Paris had put the pieces together quickly. She's been manipulating you, Paris had said, trembling with anger. My own mother. She's been trying to control who I love and how I live, and I won't let her anymore. Zend had been stunned, but it had the unintended effect of clearing the air between them. For once they had an honest conversation about where they stood, and while they agreed they weren't meant to be long-term, they parted as friends, united in their frustration with Grace. Grace, hearing about the split and realizing Paris had blamed her, tried to reach out. She left messages. She showed up at Paris's apartment. She even contacted Ridge and tried to get him to intervene. But it was too late. The damage was done. At Forrester Creations, Grace found herself sidelined. Her reputation for meddling had reached the executive floor. Eric and Brooke were polite but distant. Ridge wouldn't return her calls. Even Katie, who had once offered Grace sympathy, now kept her distance. Her plan to align herself with the Forresters through Paris had collapsed, and the isolation was swift and unforgiving. Back at the hospital, Liam was undergoing further testing. CT scans, neurological exams. He was cooperative but subdued. Hope had shown up, tears in her eyes, and Bill had stepped aside to give them space. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Liam whispered as she held his hand. I didn't want to scare you. You're not scaring me, Hope replied softly. But I am scared. Not because of what's wrong, but because you tried to carry it alone. They talked late into the night, Liam opening up more than he had in weeks. The symptoms, the disorientation, the moment he forgot what street he was on while driving. It all poured out. And Hope, instead of panicking, simply listened. She'd seen enough in her life to know that being strong didn't mean being silent. Bill watched from outside the glass. For a man who'd always prized strength and control, this had been a humbling week. Seeing his son vulnerable, admitting fears, it reminded Bill of how little power he really had when it came to fate. Grace, too, was beginning to grasp that truth. Her daughter had blocked her calls. Paris was staying with friends, refusing to speak until Grace respected her boundaries. It wasn't just a rift, it was a reckoning. Grace sat in her own apartment, the one she'd always decorated with photos of family milestones, now eerily silent. The phone didn't ring. The walls didn't talk back. And for the first time in years, Grace felt something she hadn't felt since her ex left. Alone. She had spent so long telling herself she was doing what was best for Paris, that she was guiding her toward a better life. But it was only now she realized how much of it had been about her. Her fear of being left behind. Her desire to shape the world instead of letting it evolve. Her inability to let go. At the hospital, the results of Liam's next round of tests came in. Good news, the lesion hadn't grown. It was likely benign, a result of the trauma from the accident, a contusion rather than a tumor. Still, the doctors wanted to monitor it closely. Liam would need rest, check-ins, maybe even therapy for the cognitive symptoms. But he wasn't dying. Not yet. And the fog that had settled over his mind began to lift, replaced by something unfamiliar, hope. He shared the update with Bill and Hope, and the relief was palpable. Bill hugged his son tightly, a rare show of raw emotion. "You scared the hell out of me," he muttered into Liam's shoulder. "I scared myself," Liam replied. As for Grace, the road back to her daughter's trust would be long. She knew she'd overstepped. It wasn't about strategy anymore, it was about healing. And that would take more than words. It would take patience, understanding, and, most difficult of all, surrendering control. But perhaps that was the lesson both Grace and Bill had to learn. That love isn't about managing outcomes. It's about standing beside someone through whatever comes. Even when the path is dark. Even when the plan falls apart. And so, while one father and son sat in a hospital room, breathing easier than they had in days, a mother sat alone with the silence of her regrets. But even regrets can be seeds for change, if the person carrying them chooses to let go of the past. Whether Grace could do that remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, the unraveling of control wasn't the end. It was the beginning.